Good afternoon. This is Dennis Kennelly, and you're on the Legal Line, our debut show here in the Santa Clarita Valley. We're looking forward to talking with you about your employment law questions, entertainment law questions, and we'll also touch on the topical legal issues of the day. Now, why are we here? That's a very interesting question. Well, we're here because although hopefully all of us have jobs, I mean, that's what the president and other people are talking about. We need more jobs, but most people have got a lot of questions about their legal rights as to what goes on when they work. As a matter of fact, as it turns out, they very often have a question whether they're working for you or for themselves. That's the independent contractor issue we'll be dealing with as our main topic later. What do I know about it? Well, I hope enough to make it worth your while listening. I've been doing this for over 40 years. Started out negotiating with labor unions back in the 70s when in the private sector in the newspaper industry. Did that after I got out of the Navy, where I was a criminal lawyer for 3 years, and then opened my own practice in Silicon Valley, where I spent years dealing with executives who didn't play well with others. I watched the entire growth of the Valley. My late wife was the first woman lawyer hired by Hewlett-Packard and was still there when she died. So between the two of us, we watched the Valley grow, and it was quite an experience. I really enjoyed it. I moved my practice to Southern California in 2012, although I've always had clients down here. And when I met my business partner, Laura Espinoza London, who also happens to be producing this show, got into the entertainment law field, although I'd been in it slightly because I'd represented a number of employees and executives at some major studios down here in Southern California. We do have a phone number. We're here to take your questions. The phone number is 661-298 KHTS. That's 298-6487. So feel free to call in with your 5487. Got the phone number wrong. An opening day jitter, if you will. So feel free to call in. We'd ask a couple of things. Give us your name when you call in. I mean, we don't need your full legal name, but just Joe from Newhall or something like that. Don't give the name of your company. We don't want you getting in trouble for something you say on the air and wind up calling in and getting fired for it and having to hire us to get you reinstated for retaliatory conduct. But everybody on this show works for the Acme Company. It could be the Acme Bus Company, could be the Acme Dynamite Company, so just say, "Hi, it's Joe from Newhall. I work for the Acme Bus Company. I drive a bus. I have a question." Hot topics of the day, obviously, are what's going on. Today it's in San Francisco because you've got a 3-judge panel that's taking a look at President Trump's executive order banning banning certain types of foreign travel into the United States. We'll be happy to talk about that, although that's not basically the purpose of the show. My guest, Mark Sullivan, has got some opinions on it, which he'll be happy to share with you. I'd like to introduce my first guest on this show, Mark Sullivan, who is, I've known since 1973. As it happens, we now try cases together, but our background together goes all the way back to our joint Navy days at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, a real hardship duty station for both of us, where we spent time trying cases against each other as prosecutors and defense counsel. And we tried everything from people hiding large quantities of dope inside of aqualungs to boilers blowing up and keeping Navy ships off the line for 6 months. So, Mark, welcome to the show. Why don't you tell us about your background, what you've been doing since you left the Navy?
Well, Dennis, thank you for inviting me. Yeah, well, I actually only just recently left the Navy because I stayed in the reserves for 34 years total, retiring as a captain. And I continue to represent a lot of Navy people. As a JAG for 34 years, I think I've seen every aspect of military law, and there's not many lawyers in this part of California, well, actually, most parts of California, except for maybe San Diego, that handle military benefit issues particularly. I get a lot of calls on that. I get a lot of calls also from relatives of service people that have questions that are just military law related. I spent about 24 years as the head of a in-house litigation team for a major California telephone company, and had some side duty where I was assigned to work for the Hawaiian Telephone Company, and I worked did cases for a telephone company in Michigan and in North Carolina. So I was all over the country, basically doing a lot of employment law involving lawsuits involving the telephone company, by the telephone company, against the telephone company. And that got me involved in labor law. As I think you mentioned, I am licensed in 5 states.
You are, which is no mean feat, believe me.
Yeah, one of them is Michigan. That's where when I got out of the Navy off active duty, I originally was in Michigan, and of course in Michigan in the 70s, everybody, I mean everybody, belonged to a union. So every labor issue that came up was a union labor issue. You got to be pretty knowledgeable on it. Of course, since 1978, the number of private sector unions membership, I think now nationally, is down to
12% or
12%,
something.
or even less than that, I think. The majority of union members now are public employees. Even there, I find that most of the lawyers that handle public employee cases will have a lot of expertise dealing, with Skelly hearings and all of the state law administrative procedures, but not with standard union labor law. As a result, there are a lot of remedies that state employees and county employees have that never are pursued. Most notably the Public Employee Relations Board. Most people have never heard of it. If you have a dispute with a county job and you're a member of a union and the union's not representing you, that's your only remedy, unless they're discriminating against you. In any event, what I do in my practice, I'm a solo practitioner, and you talk about people having questions, I probably get about 4 a day. I'm pretty liberal with my time and talking to anybody that calls. I think it's kind of part of the profession. You're trying to help people. Most people have issues that can be resolved by working it out with their employer, and I really advise people, to start at the lowest possible level. You don't go to nuclear war because the boss gave you a bad evaluation, but you do start protecting yourself. Or taking defensive action to protect yourself. And I find myself consulting a lot on that. I think the biggest growth area, at least in my practice, is on middle management and upper management people being laid off or being terminated by entrepreneurial companies and being offered pretty skinny severance packages and calling me up to review their severance package, particularly if it has confidentiality clause information in it. Most employees in California are very well aware of a Business and Professions Code section that says an employer can't bar you from competing. But what the employers are now doing is they're having you agree, or having the employer agree, that any dispute will be governed by the law of the state of New Jersey or New York, with venue. That is, that if you want to dispute it, you have to do it
In New Jersey.
New Jersey or New York. And if they really want to make it defensive, they'll make it in front of an arbitrator. And of course, what they've done then is they've basically signed away their protection on the non-competition, the strict non-competition law in California. Now, there's a lot of ways to fight that, and I find I'm going to say probably one call a week on that.
I get the same kind of calls. What's really interesting, the state of California, as you know, voted 62% in favor of Ms. Clinton in the recent presidential race. So there is a lot of worry in this state that the protections that California law affords employees will be eroded under the Trump administration. Just so you know, if you don't already, California is the most pro-employee state in the country from a legal standpoint. Our citizens have got more rights than, I can't think of anywhere else where they've got more rights than they have here.
They used to always say, because I'm licensed in Hawaii, they used to always say Hawaii was the most liberal. 30 years ago, Michigan was one of the most liberal, and now by comparison, Hawaii and Michigan are relatively conservative.
Exactly. So what that means is even, even if you wind up with changes in the federal law, it's not going to impact the state law. So that's something you should remember. Mark, our topic for the day is an interesting one, and that is the difference between an independent contractor and an employee. And I'll preface this by saying most people, when they're out of work, are looking for a job. They don't care if they're an independent employee or an independent contractor or an employee. They just want to go to work. But there are substantial differences between being an independent contractor and being an employee, because employees have got a lot of rights, one of which, the very basic one, is if you're injured on the job, you're covered by workers' compensation, which is important. So one of the things that Mark and I are going to go into, and we'd welcome your questions. Once again, this is your show as much as ours. Phone number is area code 661-298-5487, 298-KHTS. Give us a call and let us know if you've got any questions on our topic or any other topic involving employment or labor law or entertainment law, for that matter.
Actually, the independent contractor thing, the biggest worry, I get a lot of calls from very small businesses, sole proprietorships. And everybody and his brother thinks that they can save money by hiring somebody as an independent contractor. It is the biggest quagmire that a small business person can get themselves into. Yes, you can have somebody as an independent contractor, but the people that sit there and say, well, just call somebody a contractor and I won't have to pay workers' comp, I won't have to pay unemployment tax.
I won't have to pay their Social Security contribution.
Right, exactly. And what happens is that, the person gets injured and they're deemed to be an employee and you're sitting there with no workers' comp insurance, and which means you're liable to them.
Out of your pocket if you're the employer.
Yeah, I have a horror story on that of a small business that they let their insurance lapse. They didn't know it had lapsed. And it's literally purgatory because you have no defenses. You just pay and you pay and you pay.
Yeah.
And then you could be sued.
I mean, if somebody is, you've probably noticed if you're watching the podcast that I started this show on the disabled list. I was listening to the good advice of my cardiologist and exercising. So I blame this on him because I was walking, tripped over a curb, and fell down, breaking my wrist. I'm scheduled for surgery tomorrow. I blame him. I told him, gee whiz, you told me to exercise and I did, and look what happened. And he said, no, you didn't listen to me. I said, what do you mean? He said, I told you to watch out for curbs. It's kind of like the old Henny Youngman joke. But, yeah, you could, if this happened to somebody who you thought was an independent contractor, but who the law says is an employee, you're paying for my surgery tomorrow if I did this.
Plus your lost pay.
Right.
Plus your pain and suffering, which you don't get in workers' comp.
Right.
And plus the attorney's fees.
Yes.
It goes on and on. It's a gift that keeps on giving. And so for a small businessman, before you aggressively make somebody an independent contractor, it is well worth it to spend an hour with a competent lawyer to make sure that they legitimately are. And all those worries are bad enough. But the one thing in California that we do know that this state is very good at is collecting taxes. They like to collect taxes. And
they don't give up either.
And they don't give up. And they never sleep. They may doze, they never close, and they want to get their money. Well, the one thing that happens when you have somebody as an independent contractor is that you're not paying workers' comp insurance, you're not paying unemployment insurance. There is a whole unit of the Department of Industrial Relations, that the Bureau of Field Enforcement, and what they do is that if it's just more than one or two, let's say you get in the habit of having people as independent contractors, you can find yourself after the fact having a state agent investigate your books, which you've got to have, and if they determine that these people that you have on your books should have been employees, they will retroactively charge you workers' compensation at a rate that they have, which I would say typically is about 50% higher than the highest commercial rate that you would pay with legitimate insurance. And then they will retroactively charge you for the unemployment tax that you didn't pay, plus a penalty. And then, if there's any money left at all left in your account, that will not go uncollected. They will then hit you with a penalty that's, I can't remember the exact amount, they just raised it, but it's approximately, and I'm not a tax lawyer, but I think it's like 10% of the amount of the basic income tax, backup withholding amount that the employee would have paid. So in other words, if the basic rate is like 15%, you, the employer, end up coming up with, half of that. The long and the short of it is, the downside for a small business person in misclassifying somebody, it's really onerous. And then finally, last but not least, the state legislature, I believe it was in 2014, effective 2015, there's a new provision in the labor code that adds on top of it, as if we need it, penalties for misclassifying. Between all the other stuff, it's penalties galore. So we're dealing with the topic area that in California, it's just a minefield. But I say it's large enough money that if you're a small business person and you're going to have somebody doing something for you, particularly if it's something that's requires a license, requires skill, they're not going to be a permanent employee, you're not going to be supervising them, they may very legitimately be an independent contractor. You shouldn't do the glib, I've got a bunch of guys that work for me trimming trees, I'll just call them independent contractors, and it's cheaper. Because the first time one of them falls out of that tree, you're in a world of hurt.
Exactly. We're coming up to our first break, so we've got more to come on the subject of independent contractors, or quite frankly, any other labor or employment law or entertainment law issue you want to address. We'll remind you the phone number 661-298-5487, 661-298-KHTS, and we'll be back in a moment. Thank you.